if you fix the how, if you fix the environment will take care of everything else. But you have to be really attentive to controlling who's in that environment, what counts as good behavior, what counts as progress, what counts as, like, how do we want to be? And how can we create a consistency around that globally in what we do? Like, what kinds of stuff do we want to deliver? What looks like us? Like, when are we proud?
Welcome to Game Theory, how play is changing everything. A new video podcast series from Lightspeed and Goldman in partnership with McKinsey, where we sit down with some of the world's leading executives in gaming and interactive media to speak about the companies that define this industry that we love, the great leaders who shape them, and also how play has been changing consumer behavior and tech innovation for decades. I'm your co-host, Moritz Baier-Lentz.
I'm your co-host, Hemal Thaker.
And today we're joined by Matt Bromberg, CEO of Unity.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I have to ask you, did anyone ever talk you out of taking this job?
No, nobody tried to talk me out of it. Maybe because they know me. And I think if you know me, you know that I really view the opportunity to be at Unity as a privilege. And I think of leadership, the opportunity of leadership, as a privilege in general. You know, Unity is an important company. In the video game world, video games are really important to me. The ecosystem is important to me. And, you know, there are thousands of people who work there and they're important to me. And so being entrusted to lead that group and hopefully to help advance the project there, it's just a privilege.
You spoke a lot about choosing a challenge of impact and having an impact. How does taking over Unity play into that broader mantra?
I learned that where I can have impact is in situations where change is needed and desired. You know, I spent a lot of early parts of my career jumping back and forth between big companies and startups and feeling frustrated in both environments. Because you don't have scale in startups, and big companies are just slow and nobody wants to do anything and nobody wants to really look hard and there's not a lot of urgency. What sits in the middle is like great companies that have real scale but need change. And so you don't spend a lot of time, you know, debating that urgency is important, that change is important, that you need to get better, that you want to do things differently. We all accept that. And we've got the scale to do something about it. And so now we just get to work. And I love environments like that because you can have this impact. And honestly, for me, it's less about the impact on the business itself and at least as much about the impact on the people with whom you're interacting, who are looking for help to kind of heal and get better and bring growth back to their businesses and kind of happiness and healthiness back into their lives. And that for me is just hugely exciting.
And it has significant ripple effects also for the employees, their families.
I think it does. I mean, we all spend a lot of time thinking about how do you make meaning in the world. And I thought a lot about it. And, you know, I even sort of almost semi-retired a little bit once. And what I realized is, like, I can't find another way of making impact in the world at this scale, where you've got thousands of people and they're connected each to friends and partners. And so there's this giant ripple effect. And then there's customers and their lives, especially in our business, things that are being created with your products, and like making that better, you know, makes the world a better place. And at least I've not found something where I can make that same kind of impact.
I guess it seems only fitting that a company who helps others build worlds put at the helm someone who really also thinks a lot about building a world for others. Do you see this analogy?
One of sort of the main tenets of my life, and which I try to share also with the folks at Uni, is just I think it's really important to control your own destiny. And that we need to be participants and active participants in creating the environment we want to be in and creating the environment we need for good things to happen. Like, that's our responsibility. And that's what I love about being in companies. If the organization is not organically producing high quality answers, just naturally, it's just sort of this fascinating process of understanding, like, well, what is it about the system that produces suboptimal stuff? And how do we go about creating an environment which will enable the right stuff to emerge? And that's how you get scale in a business. It's not running around fixing things, It's much more about the how than it is about the what. If you fix the how, if you fix the environment will take care of everything else. But you have to be really attentive to controlling who's in that environment, what counts as good behavior, what counts as progress, what counts as how do we want to be? And how can we create a consistency around that globally in what we do? What kinds of stuff do we want to deliver? What looks like us? When are we proud? And if you can kind of inculcate those ideas, then the awesome people do everything else.
And it should be fun, right? We're in gaming. After all, you've spent so much of your time in the gaming industry. It seems like that's an industry of privilege and joy by definition.
I think it is. I mean, it is I suppose, the relative playground of human existence, but that's okay. Somebody has to do it. I love video games. I love playing video games. I love the act of creation. I do think that creating video games is like nothing else I've seen in the world, where you kind of have the opportunity to sit around a table with artists and economists and system designers and engineers and producers and finance people and try to figure out how to create something which gets the best out of everybody's impulses, but doesn't get pulled too much to one side or another. You can't have, an amazing economy which is punishing for people. You can't have a beautiful game which doesn't engage them because the systems aren't there, right? You can't make a game on budget if it's not also on quality. And so there's this push-pull, and you need all those people to connect in the right ways, using the right tools, which is a big part of how I think about Unity. And all that has to work out to make something incredible. And that process is like nothing else in the world.
All the things that need to come together to make a great game or make a great game engine. You're operating in the domain of technology, of course, science, art. You're often pushing the boundaries when it comes to 3D graphics. I think NVIDIA is such a fascinating example of a company that was born in gaming to perform complex 3D calculations, and then became the backbone, became this most powerful computational engine that we could come up with to also be the foundation of blockchain, autonomous driving, and then most recently, of course, the generative AI revolution that we're in right now. What other patterns do you see? Are game engines falling into this world of gaming, breaking all kind of frontiers and then trickling into other sectors and industries?
Yeah, I mean, you guys really know this, obviously, but I think it is true, and maybe generally folks don't understand it, that gaming and making games and the process of making games is so difficult and so competitive that it is often the case that if you can get something done in that environment, it is going to have benefits outside of gaming because the technical demands are so high. The competitive demands are so intense. The market is so intense, especially around free-to-play gaming, where value is only created downstream as an output of really deep engagement. If you can figure out those kinds of challenges, then I think the rest of the market is waking up to the idea that, hey, these things are going to have value. They're outside of gaming. And it's I think you're exactly right. I think it's a fascinating trend.
So let's talk a little bit about the business. I think Unity for many years now has been a bedrock of the industry. And in many ways, it's a barometer in some ways for the health of the industry as well. It's been through a monumental journey, right? Now, obviously, as a public company and in the years since. How do you think about, what defines Unity today? And, how do you see that sort of evolving over time? And I guess, do you still think of the democratization of game development as one of its core values?
I do think the democratization of gaming is a really incredible kind of birthright that the company has. And I think about it a lot. And I think in many ways, we've achieved that vision from a world in which tools like Unity didn't exist. to a world in which literally an individual sitting on his or her couch can make a multi-billion-dollar video game. Like, if that's not the democratization of video game, I don't know what is, right? And the tools we make played a really big part in making that possible. And it's important that we remain tied to that because it's a connection to our community and to creativity and to accessibility, which is incredibly important. The real question for us now is, okay, what does that vision mean tomorrow? Like, we know what it meant yesterday. To a large degree, we achieved it. How do we take that, the energy of that, and the centrality of that, and turn it into something great tomorrow? We live in a really different world, and there are lots of ways for us to do that.
Well, I'm excited to see which directions you go. So, speaking of developers, right? I think Unity is the platform of choice for millions of developers around the world. What do you think uniquely positions the company in this market, and how do you see the company shaping the future of game development?
There's a lot that's unique about Unity, but I'd say the most important thing is that I believe we're the only company in the world that is capable of helping creators through the whole life cycle of development, from prototyping through building, through operating multi-billion-dollar live services, to going out to acquire new users, to monetizing ad inventory inside those games. The whole ecosystem, we're playing a meaningful role in every part of that. And there's nobody else in the world can do that. And that position is one that I love because it means effectively that we're truly a platform for that whole life cycle. And we can deliver very specific and really high value tools that integrate each of those parts and make each of those parts stronger. And historically, we had not executed to the level that makes that vision real, because that vision requires extraordinarily high degrees of execution. Each of those parts of those life cycle has its own challenges, own competitors, own tools, and linking them all together holistically in a way that creates value both in each spot and together is not an easy challenge, but it's one that I'm really excited about us pursuing and winning.
Your background, you've had many stints in the development side of the equation, right? Here, and as an effective customer of Unity. So you've lived in those shoes. How do you think that experience and many experiences that you've had in that context have helped you, look at things differently?
You're right. I was a customer both of the engine for many years and made a lot of games with the engine, and also on the advertising side. When I had Zingo, we probably spent $1 billion a year in marketing or something like that directionally. So definitely understood each part and how the parts are connected holistically in terms of how you run a business. For me, everything about the way I think about Unity comes from this place of having been a customer. I think that's probably good advice for anybody running a company, but it's an easy one for me because I remember it and actually was, so it's not like some trick of the mind I have to engage in. As a customer, I always saw the promise in the company and the promise of what it could deliver, but was often frustrated with the delivery. My primary focus is coming in and being better for customers. We're at the Game Developers Conference. We talk a lot about delivering stability and performance and not making customers choose between new features and stability. Like, incredibly basic stuff, but historically not something we valued as much as we should. When you get people what they need, then they give you permission to dream with them. But you have to deliver the basics in a rock solid way first, and then organically people come to you with more stuff, and then customers will trust you to deliver those things. If you're not giving them what they need, they okay, maybe this new thing, but you know what, it's just not the right vibe, right? So we're working really hard on doing both, like focused on the future, delivering what will be the next generation of what is a game engine, delivering the next generation of our advertising tools, but also working really, really hard to deliver today and every day and making the software better every day and solving the real pain points that customers have. And that's the most important thing. That reconnection with customers has been really important.
We did a bit of research on all your various life mottos. You have a true genuine love for improving things. Like, one of the things we found over and over again was you saying, let's just be a little bit better than yesterday. Sounds like me playing Rocket League. How does that trickle down from your leadership into the organization? Like, what does that actually mean a little bit better than yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, especially in situations where you're reviving a business. And so folks have had a little bit of difficult time. You're bringing something back. You can't depend on the normal inputs to tell you what you're doing is the right thing. Like, you need to fall in love with doing the right thing in the right way for its own sake, whether or not you get rewarded for it. And I say to people internally all the time, like, we've had the experience sometimes of doing what turned out to be the wrong thing, and we got rewarded for it. And you might have the experience now of doing the right thing, and maybe you won't get, maybe the stock won't go up. I don't know. But it's not important. What's important is doing the right thing in the right way. That's its own reward.
An intrinsic motivation.
It has intrinsic value. And I mean, when I say, like, I don't care what happens beyond that, I really,
Well, you're still running a public company.
But here's what I believe. And by the way, this is true in gaming as well. You have this debate all the time when you're operating big live services, you're making games. Let's say revenue in a game is dropping. You're running a company. Somebody says, you have to make the revenue go back up. Okay. If you chase revenue and you're building a game and operating a game, I guarantee you will end in tears, right? Revenue is a trailing indicator. It's not a leading indicator. That's true in any system. It's true in a game system. It's true for a company. If you want to produce revenue the right way, in a sustainable, healthy way, you need to look to the system and understand how to fundamentally change the system in a way that makes it more engaging or more enjoyable. And downstream, that engagement will produce revenue. Companies are the same way. If everyone chases the problem of the moment, or everyone's running around trying to make revenue go up, I guarantee you will be doing all the wrong things. What you have to do is take a breath. And of course, we're responsible as shareholders. We have to do the right thing. But what is good for shareholders and everybody else is to take a breath and say, how can we make fundamental change so that this system produces better? That can sometimes be frustrating as people say, well, I want to fix the problem. It may not feel like we're fixing the problem for a minute. Take a breath. I promise you it'll fix the problem. 10 minutes from now, you'll see how that plays out. That lesson, which I learned inside making games, is it couldn't be more applicable to everything else you do.
You know, the gaming industry's faced a lot of challenges recently. And I think if I'm a developer, I'm navigating increasingly complex distribution, development, publishing, monetization, all these different challenges, and at competitive, tension as well. How do you think about supporting developers, not only in creation, but also on operation and monetization? How do you think about helping them sort of reach players in a successful way in this environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the privilege of being at uni is that, we're a tools provider. And I think sometimes people use that word in a way that's denigrating, and some like, oh, who wants to be a tool provider? I want to be a tool provider. We provide the tools that people use to build their businesses. As a consequence, we're in a position, maybe in the ideal position, to help the industry be better and different. I can tell you from, having run a games company, that there's this equation that exists in your mind when you're operating a games business, which is, how much money can I spend making new stuff? The P&L is what it is. You come to the end of the year, it's like, how many points of margin can I afford to reinvest in something new? Because there's this tension always, right? Between, I've got to make my existing live services business work and produce for me, but I need new things. That's the lifeblood of any company. The single biggest value we could offer this industry is to help people build better games, more innovative games, more efficiently. If a game takes 300 people in 3 years versus 100 people in a year, you're going to make a lot more games in the latter than you are in the former. And we're in an amazing position to harness the changes that have come in the industry, the sort of explosion that we're experiencing around AI and other things, and put that back into the tool so that people can make games more efficiently, which produces more time for them to innovate, and will give them more abilities to make more games. And if that is our primary goal, the piece that is connected to that, to your point, is we also have these advertising and marketing tools so that once people create and begin to create, we can also, in a really integrated way, help them understand that consumer in a way that will also aid them in bringing customers into that experience, because that's the two sides of the creation. I create something and then it's quiet there. I got to go find people to bring into that world. So we can do both those things. The thing that connects both sides of that creation is a really deep understanding of consumers, of gamers, of consumer behavior. I need to understand the gamer when I'm building. I need them to touch and feel my systems and respond to them so that I can know how to build around them. And I need that data immediately. I need it always. And then when I turn to trying to find customers, I have that same need to understand who is it who's going to be likely to want to play this game. How do I design systems in a way that appeals to that person? In order to answer that question, I need to understand that person. So that is the primary values we were talking about of having a unified platform. We create tools that make it possible to create, and then we leverage the understanding we have of game consumers to make that process easier, and also to help you bring folks into the process. And that's effectively our vision for the company.
What do you think about the bottlenecks that exist for developers, right? So you obviously have millions of them who use your platform. You speak to many of them. What are sort of the next problem sets, if you think about it, that you're aiming to tackle and help developers with?
We're in a really interesting period in our industry. And I know there's a lot of noise out there. Folks are sort of, their view would be like that the industry is struggling in some way. I actually don't see it that way. I accept that there's been some pain in our industry and we've had a lot of layoffs and there's some big games that have come out that haven't quite worked. And I get all that. But I actually think we're going through a little bit of a period of creative destruction. And it has been my experience, having lived through several cycles, that we're going to come out as an industry much stronger than we went into this, period of some difficulty. There's a few things that are going to happen. The first thing is creators are going to innovate. They always do. And innovators do best with constraints. And yeah, there are constraints in the world. Discoverability is a challenge in gaming. We have kind of fewer big live services that are attracting the vast majority of customers who are ever more embedded in those spaces. So it's harder to pull them away. It is becoming increasingly expensive to make games. The cost of acquiring customers seems to be rising. These are all challenges. On the other hand, the industry will innovate around those things. We'll find new platforms, web gaming, instant gaming. Microsoft and Sony will come out with new consoles. Nintendo will come out with a new console. And it's all going to be fine. By the way, at the end of the hardware cycle, in every cycle, everybody thinks gaming is terrible, right? Oh my God, Why would I have anything to do with this business? It's terrible. I've seen it. I'm not that old. I've seen it at least twice. We always find a way back. There is no lessening of enthusiasm for interactive entertainment. There are ever more platforms for that entertainment. Sometimes there's a little bit of lag between the time that folks who create can find some of those new platforms and find the modes to connect with folks on those platforms, or maybe do the business model or distribution innovation that they need to do to figure out how to get around some of these things. But that will happen. If we can help people build and market and enable them, give them the space to create that innovation, then we're probably doing what we need to do.
In this topic of creative destruction, where does generative AI fall? Because that's obviously a big topic for engines right now. In my mind, as an investor, I'm thinking, hey, we had somewhat dedicated engines for the PC console era, then for mobile and XR. It's not exactly a platform shift, but it is a paradigm shift of sorts. Is there going to be a dedicated engine for AI? I mean, we have a bet with in-world AI in the market. So I don't mind you guys maybe losing out on it, but I'm sure you have an opinion on that and you rather be that engine yourself.
Here's our view of this market. You think about these things on kind of two ends of the spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, you've got the whole Gen AI world, to your point, asset creation. It could be a sprite, it could be a 3D animation, it could be a video, and there are all sorts of folks figuring out how to create those assets. Great. On the far other end of the spectrum, you've got DeepMind, Microsoft, or others who are sort of hallucinating full experiences that are effectively videos of interactive experience.
World models.
Models. It's our view that what will likely eventuate sits somewhere in the middle. It comports very much with our sense of what it means to be a platform in this space. Unity has always been an assembly point. Its strength has always been its extensibility. We're not some vertically integrated, console game engine. There are others who do that. That's not who we are. Our position has always been hey, we're here as a platform. Whatever tools you need, whatever assets you need, you put them together on this platform. We help you build deep systems around them, and we go from there. So we're agnostic with respect to where 3D assets get created. I couldn't care less. When I joined the company, we were investing really heavily in Gen AI. It's investment I ended immediately because I don't want to be in that business. And I want the business to bloom. I don't want to be in it. We're moving towards integrating best-of-breed Gen AI partners into the platform in ways that help people make more games quickly. On the other side, I do believe that ultimately we're going to be in this space where you have human beings who are have at their fingertips vertically oriented agents around physics, lighting, sound, I/O, whatever it is, and that there will be humans in that chain that are orchestrating those agents to help build full experiences, full systems. It's not very unlike the way it works now. It's just that the agents themselves will be very different. We're going to position ourselves pretty much the way we are positioned. We're going to work really hard to bring agentic behavior into the engine so that it's faster and easier to use, and to create a platform which can really happily host and orchestrate all those tools which are going to be. I'm not fighting that process. All of these individual enhancements to the process need to be organized when it comes time to build. And I like where we sit in that space.
And this, I think, relates predominantly, I would argue, to design time AI innovation, helping developers build existing experiences faster and cheaper. What about runtime solutions? When we think about, let's forget about the world models and kind of like a video approach to game design, like an interactive video approach. But if things stay within the world of 3D with textures and polygons and we're automating that, but there is a chance for bringing truly, immersive worlds to life and not just have agents in an enterprise context, but inside video games. Is that a future that you see? Will that ultimately run and be powered by Unity runtime?
Our runtime historically, it has been this incredibly widely distributed. I think it's like 8 billion DAU, not deduplicated, but I don't know, let's cut it in half, call it 4, call it 3. It's enormous. And that runtime has done the things that runtime do. It renders, we distribute it, it delivers the game logic. But we haven't created more value for gamers and for developers by virtue of the fact that they use our runtime. Mm-hmm. The runtime has done its job and it's fabulous, but we haven't pushed value out to the edge in the runtime. That's an idea we're really interested in because as you push things out to the edge, all these opportunities exist, including, for example, one of the best pieces of technology we've designed and built recently is something we call Centis, which pushes sort of the AI inferences out to on device. Mm-hmm. Yes, that is where I believe inference is going to take place. It's just one of many sort of tools that we have that we can push out to the edge and help builders build with. So I think it's a real opportunity there. It's one we have to be careful with, but it's an amazing opportunity.
Touching on an expansion of that, right, with respect to data, obviously you're plugged in billions of devices for that matter. You have a lot of data. Do you see that as something that's being used to its full potential for the service of developers? How do you see that roadmap for you, or what are you doing on that front?
I think there's much more value we can provide. And I think sometimes inside our community, there's a sensitivity around data and use of data. As a consequence, it's something you have to be really thoughtful about and really programmatic about. We've talked about it a lot over the years, but I don't know that we've really delivered. And there's value across the ecosystem we're talking about. I give you just a really obvious example. And it's not something we do super well today, but that there's no reason why we couldn't. I'm operating a multi-billion-dollar live service. It's built on Unity. Do we do everything we can today to provide the operator of that live service with as much information and data as we can about the performance of the game and how consumers are responding to that game, right back into the dashboard, right back in the editor? Do we do that? No. Why? I don't know. Because people thought data was scary, maybe. I can't explain it. There isn't a developer in the world that I know who wouldn't benefit and be excited about having a greater understanding of the folks who are playing their games. So that's the kind of thing we should probably spend more time thinking about, and we are. But it's just the most obvious example. And yet, at the same time, when I turn to wanting to acquire players for my game, a deep understanding of consumer behavior is going to be really helpful there too. And again, it's got to be privacy safe. It's got to be opt-in. You have to do it all in the right way. Unlocking that value, that data value, the consumer value is going to be enormously valuable for developers and for Unity. And we've talked a lot about our desire to do better there.
So maybe taking that a step further on the product side, right? So you've got the platform, got the data, etc. Launching a new release of the game engine is no small feat, right? And that happens periodically over a period of years. Tell us more about that, and also, I suppose, as people look forward to the next versions, etc., what Unity does to support developers in the interim period.
Yeah, listen, game engines are deep tech. It's real stuff. They're not for the faint of heart, and we have an amazing team globally that works really hard. To your point, often for many years in between major releases. We just released Unity 6, which has been so far the most successful release we've ever had in terms of consumer adoption. It's the most stable and performing one we've ever had. I'm really, really pleased with that. 6.1 and to a little degree 6.2 and 6.3, which will be the next 3 releases that we'll do this year. But by the way, even just that has been a transformation for us. Historically, we've not done numbered releases and we've not done point releases that you could prepare for and anticipate and upgrade when it was right for you. We operated in our own world with our own sort of rules. And we want to keep the energy and the vibrancy of sort of who we were, but we also want to deliver more frequent updates. We want those updates to be more stable. And we don't want customers to have to choose between new features and stability. We historically put a lot of pressure on developers to sort of solve our problems for us. We release software and we'd say, hey, yeah, report back and tell us what breaks and we'll fix it. It's just not a great model for a software business. And so one of the things we've done to fundamentally change the way we're building the engine is we've embarked on something we call production verification. So we've partnered with key customers in order to test everything we do in real production environments. And folks who are out in front, who are already building on Unity 6, we've had key customers sort of let us behind the curtain into their production environment so we can see our software running in those environments and make what changes we need to make. It sounds straightforward, maybe even a little bit obvious, but these are things we've not done in the past. And so the pace of innovation and the pace of change and the amount of value we're going to be able to push to engine customers is really going to increase because we're just being much more disciplined about how we approach it. And that is the business of software. And I always say to people, if you cannot predict time and quality and feature set in software, you cannot have a software business. This part of it is not art. That part is production science. And it's not okay that we weren't doing that. And now we are doing it, and it's making a big difference. And our customers are really appreciating it. And it's kind of discipline in it that we've added to the sort of already incredible talent we have on the team. And it's, I think, serving us well.
Great to hear.
Well, interestingly, we just learned from Walter Driver that he studied English literature, and the same holds true for you.
Yes.
On top of that, you also did pass the New York bar. So you are truly an artist, I guess, and a scientist, if I may say so. Where do these former lives of Matt come to play in leading Unity and thinking through product enhancements, development, etc.?
Yeah, I'm not sure that any of that really helped in terms of the day-to-day of what I do. I'm a big believer in following the things that you find interesting and that you have passion for, and not worrying a lot about what happens after that. I loved reading and writing, and I thought I was going to be a professor. I followed that path for a while, and then I realized sitting by myself in a library was not going to be the life I wanted. And
turns out you're still dealing with plenty of libraries now.
Yeah, it's fair enough. I went to law school, and then I didn't want to be a lawyer, and I went into media and online systems and gaming. And so I always say this to my kids, like, it's not important what you choose. It's important that you choose. You just have to be committed to what you're doing. and you learn things and good things happen. And if you get information later, it turns out you want to make a different decision, you make the decision, but you're all in on the decision you're making until you're not. And I try to lead my life that way. And I think that is a good lesson for how to run companies and how to interact with people. Maybe part of the advantage as I'm thinking about it is that because I don't come from a traditional environment in terms of technology and game making, I think about the activity as a primarily human endeavor first, as opposed to thinking about writing code first. And I'm sure there's strengths and weaknesses of both those things. But when we started this session, we talked a lot about this. I think about businesses as collections of human beings, and the challenge of businesses about how to get the best out of those folks by being as clear as I possibly can about what we're trying to do, by choosing people really carefully and understanding what people do well and understanding how to connect them, being able to recognize talent, being open to showing the things openly, the things I don't understand, and ask for help. And those things are human activities. They get laddered up into businesses, but businesses are about people. The advantage I have, if it's an advantage, is just being able to think about it that way.
And where does play come in your leadership style, or maybe even in your personal life?
I love video games, and I play all the time. I mean, and to me, video games can be an incredible, powerful force for connecting people and things. My first job at Electronic Arts, I was living in the East Coast, and I took a job in Austin, Texas, and my wife and kids didn't want to move there, and so I moved by myself, and I lived there during the week, and I would fly home on the weekends, and like all during the week, I played Madden with my son. Those are powerful things. Like there's nothing else like playing together is an incredibly powerful, fundamental human thing. Humans need that. Like anything else, these things can, get out of whack and be too much, and we need to be careful. But the fundamental idea of playing together is really powerful, and it's amazing to live in an environment where your work can make play like that. I mean, that's just great. It just doesn't get better than that.
I mean, we were even bending investment banking and venture capital to be compatible with gaming.
Well, that's exactly right. But it's like, but you guys both started out loving gaming, right? You're both gamers. You came to it from the substance of the thing. And the other stuff you can learn, right? You can learn how to be a banker or a venture capitalist, I guess. I don't know. It's confusing for me. But the thing you can't replace is, have you ever met people for whom like the work you're doing is an abstraction? Where they talk about it and it sounds right pretty much. And it seems like, and maybe they've been doing it for decades, but you can sort of tell that they're disconnected from the thing itself. They don't actually know how that thing comes together. They don't really know what those constituent parts are. They don't know what those skill sets are. They don't understand the technology. It's just a thing. I don't like that. Like, I think you should understand the thing as the starting point to building something around it, because it's not like fungible to me. It's not all the same.
The way I looked at it over the last 10 years, which was basically my time bending, I guess, investment banking and then venture capital into ultimately a job, which was connecting with the thing that I was passionate about, which was gaming, and people and an industry that I really care about is focusing ruthlessly on the end. Like for me, the end was having an impact in an industry that I love and not falling in love with the means, which first was banking, then venture capital. I think it's very easy to fall in love with the means and forget that it is still a means. At least that's how I like to look at things. And that gives me a lot of energy in an industry that other people might find quite boring or an interesting, weird lens on the gaming industry. But I'm having a blast.
I think that's true. But I think both you guys are like that. I mean, I think that what distinguishes you is that you have a connection to the substance of the thing. And I think that for people recognize that. Some people won't, and those people are not going to be as important, right? But the people who do will. And I think it's important.
Maybe a lighter touch question, right? As a former studio head, what do you think makes games fun?
For me, the most important thing when I was running a game studio was not to fall in love with my own opinion about what we should do. And I see creative executives fall into this trap all the time. What happens, especially if you're in a relatively big company, you've got teams making different games and they're They're tight, relatively small teams. They're spread all over the world. So part of what happens in your life is you get on the plane, you fly out there to check in. And so the team will show you what the game is. You'll play it, whatever, and then you'll have a conversation. I have an opinion about those things, just like anybody else. You would sit down, you have an opinion. The difference is I don't think my opinion is important. It's especially true if you're in charge, because if you say something, people will respond to it. So it's particularly important, in my view, that you not express opinions. If you think you can fly somewhere and touch down in a city and spend 3 days with a team and routinely provide answers which are better than the ones that they're coming up with, that is not something you should feel good about. It means you have the wrong team, and you should fire people and find other people. My experience of growing up in this industry is the opposite. That what you get is somebody who's in charge who loves his or her opinion, and they come in and they express their opinion and people respond to it. And that dynamic is ruinous for making games. It's absolutely ruinous. The way I have always thought about making games is the experience true to itself? So if you describe to me what you're trying to accomplish, and I listen really intently and I understand and I'm clear on it, I can compare what the aspiration you're describing to the thing I'm experiencing. And I can ask you, okay, so here's what we thought we wanted to do. In what ways do you think that's living up to that or falling short? Like, where do we need to go? That's a reasonable conversation to have. That conversation is not, I don't like the way characters are leveling up. Can you change that? Or this system is, I found this boring. As soon as you come in and start picking, you lose all your impact. Especially the better the team is, the more impact you lose. A bad team isn't actually that demoralized by that. Great teams will immediately despise you, and if they're smart, ignore you. But sometimes they feel pressure not to ignore you, and that's when things get knocked off track. As we were talking about before, like, I'm really into the how and I'm less into the what. Gaming is one of those things where everybody's got an opinion. Just because you play a game doesn't mean you're a game designer. It means you have an opinion about it. It's equally valid, but that's my opinion. There's millions of opinions. That's not how you build and run creative teams. And so for me, the way to find fun or the way to build a great game has really always been about having clarity of vision, really constantly holding up that vision to the reality of what you have, and being super clear about trying to get to that place, and also open-minded that you might have been wrong about some things about the place and then changing it, but then be super clear about that and drive towards that. It's avoiding the swirl. It's avoiding the complexity, and it's making something the best it can be, not chasing some other thing. Like, it has to be organically what it is. Game projects get into trouble when you have an intellectual property that wants to be one thing, but because you think consumers want this other thing, you need to stretch it beyond its natural place, right? Or you've got a team that really knows how to build one thing, but you're going to force them to build something else because you think that's what's required. Those things don't work. And by the way, we know they don't work, but people do them again and again and again, right? They change direction. They tell people what to do. They take teams that aren't experienced in something and they make them do it. They take new teams that don't have a lot of experience and overinvest in those teams. Like we know how to maximize the chance of success. It doesn't mean we're always going to have success, because you just need lightning too, right? But you can know how to maximize your chances of success, but you have to be disciplined about it. And you have to approach it in the right way. And that's the way I always try to approach it.
We'll end on this wonderful note. Matt, I feel like we really got to know you as a person, not just as an executive in the session here. Thank you for taking the time sitting down with us. For our listeners and those who watched, if you like what you saw, if you like what you heard, tune in on lsbp.com/game theory for more episodes. Thank you.